mother. And so we've shown the first 2 points here, that the unborn is alive. We've shown that it's a separate individual being. But now the question becomes, well, what kind of being is it? Is this separate and distinct living being a dog being? Is it a spider being? Is it a Venus flytrap being? What kind of being in the taxonomological addresses of biological entities is it? And it turns out that there's 2 ways to know that the unborn is definitively a human being. The first way is simply by looking at what's known as its genetic signature. And so if you were to evaluate the DNA of the unborn, you discover something very interesting. So if you had, say, 4 early embryos of different living beings, and you didn't know what these beings were, you could test the DNA of each of those things, because if you just look at them, you can't tell what they are. But once you test their DNA, you might come to find out that one of them turns out to be a fish, the other one a bird, the other one a turtle, and another one perhaps a human being, simply by looking at its DNA. So the DNA definitively tells us that the unborn is a human type of being. But there's another obvious way we can come to understand this, and that is by what's known as the law or the principle of biogenesis. And this is something that Louis Pasteur discovered back in the 19th century. He debunked the idea of spontaneous generation. He said, look, living beings reproduce after their own kind. Things don't just pop into existence. A living being has to come from another living being. And so in the case of this particular principle, he said, look, if you have 2 dogs that mate, they're going to produce another what? Dog, right. You've got 2 lions that are going to mate. What are they going to produce? A lion. That's right. And so this produces a very interesting kind of test. If you want to know what kind of being something is, all you got to do is ask, what are its parents? And if its parents are human beings, then its offspring has to be also a human type of being, because species reproduced after their own kind. My wife and I, when we had our first kid, we may have wondered whether we're going to have a boy or a girl, but it's not like we wondered whether we're going to have a human or not, right? And then when we had our second kid, it's not like we were like, oh, wow, another human. Wow, what are the chances, you know? Because we know from human parents come human offspring. And so there's 2 obvious ways there that we can know that the unborn is a human being. And so there we've shown through the science of embryology, again, I haven't appealed to any Bible verse, I haven't appealed to any fringe philosophy. I simply appeal to the science of embryology to show 3 things. The unborn is alive, separate and distinct from its mother's body, and third, it's a human being. As a result, we can conclude safely that the unborn is a human being, just like you and me, from the moment of conception.